Hello all you railway people. This is a good little video when I was up there, also regards to Theo Hayes. Now you're thinking, why? Well, you've got to start putting all this stuff together. The state government sacks the railway commissioner. Backpackers then find out that there's no train to Byron Bay. So backpackers start buying cars in Sydney. Then they drive to Byron Bay because there's no train there because they're carrying all their gear in their surfboards. And it's called the major domino effect. Now, you all know what dominoes do. Now we've got Rail Trail trying to take over Mooloolaba to Crabs Creek. Now they're having a council election to make it a rail trail, and a railway, working railway. Then you've got Byron Bay City Council has a Byron Bay solar powered train, the only one in the world, the most easily put in Australia, the most world recognised name. You know, you say Byron Bay anywhere around the world, they say, yeah, Australia. And yet it can't even pull up on the Byron Bay train station. Go down and look on Mr. Hominoid on my channel, you can see it. Well, I'll actually show you what they've done to it. Then I put the ones up there saying how they could reopen the line the way it used to be back in the 1980s. We had 4 or 5 two-car diesels passing each other. Then you got the government saying, oh no, it's going to cost $7.5 million per kilometre or whatever, some ridiculous amount, when it's only $33,000 per kilometre, which is what the Byron Bay Railway done to do theirs. 33,000 or 330,000, not sure. Go down and watch the video clip. This is it. What's it got to do with Theo Hayes? Well, Theo, he had to go down there by bus because there's no more trains. But then again, he can't buy from Brisbane, so he would have come in there by bus anyway. But from my time being there as a cab driver and driving there in the bus since 2004, as I said on many of my video clips, it's hundreds of people go hitchhiking out of Byron Bay and attracts all the bad people that come along there, the predators. Because they know people, once you stand out on the side of the road, you try hitchhiking. Before the pandemic, before everybody went into lockdown, before everybody had to stay in their own states, and even then they were around the 5 kilometres from home. Now, in fact, when we're locked in the 5 kilometres around home, domestic violence went up by 25%, but other crimes went down. Now the place is opening up again. So now we're right back to where we started. Why can't we bring our trains back? So here's a short excerpt of this video clip. Now this is done by Neil Battersby. His father worked on the railway line at Bangalore when he was alive. Neil grew up on that railway line. And Beth, I know her personally. I know Neil personally. And even the railway guy, I met him. The track inspector guy. Let's just have a little look. Why shouldn't the Northern Rivers have back their railway?
For the development of any nation, rail has always been at the forefront. At the moment, in Australia, especially in New South Wales, we are the laughing stock of the world when it comes down to transport.
Just before the line was closed, there was a major re-sleepering program done. There were bridge building and repairs.
This rail is actually in very good condition. Even though we are standing on a straight piece of track, this rail shows very little signs of wear.
9,000 people came to the opening of the railway, and it was called the line from nowhere to nowhere because it was our train for our region. Hi, today we're going to talk about the Casino to Murwillumbah railway line. When I talk to people in our community, I often find that they've given up on ever having the train back, and they...
Right, now Bev, she's a lovely lady. Hello, Bev, if you're watching this. So to all my subscribers around the world, everybody else watches this, let's put it into perspective. You just seen the old train starting there, the line from nowhere to nowhere. Well, you got to go get a map out if you don't know New South Wales, and you got to start from Lismore, then you head down towards Bangalore, and then you go down to Byron Bay, and then you go round to Mullumbimby, and then they built the railway line up there to Murwillumbah. And then from Murwillumbah, they eventually built it on to Condom, which is a very famous world-renowned sugar mill that you always see on those TV ads of Australia, and they show a big sugar mill. That's Condom. Well, yes, I'm holding it on my big TV set. Sorry about that. Anyway, so what happened then? Then they decided, okay, we'll build from Lismore to Casino. Then from Casino, they built it up to Kyogle, and then they built it all the way down to Grafton, which I've got a video there. Grafton train station, purple flower pots. Well, then when they built that, the government hadn't even built the railway line from Maitland, west of Newcastle yet, to go up the northern coast. So they had to build from Maitland to Talara, to Dungog, to Taree, and all the way up through there. Kendall, Port Warhope, near Port Macquarie, Coffs Harbour, and then finally up to South Grafton. Then it took them a couple of years to work out how to build a bridge across the big river. Huge big river. So what they did, they took the trained ferry out from Lavender Bay, Milson's Point, over to Hickson Road that used to use the steam engines. They used to unload the big ships from overseas. This is way back about 1910, 1920. And that's what they used. And then when they finished with it, they sunk it and parked it on the banks of the river there at Grafton. Yeah, and it's still there. Parts of it you can still see at the right time. So a big train carrying ferry used to ferry the train carriages across from South Grafton to North Grafton. Then that railway line made $11 million, costed $11 million a year to maintain it from Casino to Murwillumbah. But it made $22 million a year alone in seats from Murwillumbah to Central only. That's not counting the local diesel train services from the local stations, and also, say, Murwillumbah to Casino, Murwillumbah to Coffs Harbour, Murwillumbah to Casino back up to Brisbane, or anywhere else. They made $11 million, $22 million from Murwillumbah to Central alone in 1979 or 1978. Go down, watch the video. Neil gives you all the correct facts. I might be a little bit off. This video is about 4 years old. Now the drama is the Byron Bay Railway can't go the level crossing. They just put in a great big new bus terminal on the western side of Byron Bay train station to get the buses out of Byron Bay's main street, which is Johnson, Jonson Street, which is where Theo disappeared. And then there's no real public transport between Byron Bay to Bangalore or to Lismore or up to Casino. You have to wait for the railway train to show up. railway bus, sorry. And then Northern River City Council, they're doing what they did with the train track up there at Casino. Lismore City Council decided to listen to a bushfire brigade guy who does know nothing about floodwaters or bridges, and he talked the council into removing part of the track on the western side of Lismore. I mean, how's he qualified? He said, "Oh, stop the floodwater." No, it wasn't the train track stopping the floodwater. It was that the railways pulled out and there was no one there to mow the grass down in the creek like you have in your own town. How many times you've been down the local park and you see that big tractor with the big long arm on the back, and they put the big cutting blade down into the long grass down inside the creeks, and they clean all the creeks out and cut down all the long grass. That's all it needed. But this idiot, I'm going to call him an idiot, turned around and told the council, take the rails away, way up above. Well, in that case, go around all the parks and take all the footpaths, bridges, away from the top of the creeks because they're blocking the floodwater. See how stupid it is? It's like saying, go knock a bridge down going over a river because the water flows underneath the bridge. It's going to block the floodwater. Duh. But that was Lismore City Council. But I just hope they know that they're going to have to pay for that one day, because when the railways do come back, they're legally entitled to hit them with the bill to say, hey, you're going to pay for that because you destroyed public property. But those council members have since left the council. They'll probably be dead and buried. But anyway, just on Northern Rivers, but just think about it. If the train was still running up there at Byron Bay, right through there to Mooloolaba, and then the plans are to go from Mooloolaba right through to Coolangatta Airport, with New South Wales gauge 4'8". Victoria's now 4'8". I done a story on on Australian railway gauges. Go down the channel and have a look, see the different railway gauges. And you'll see how Victoria's now only got 16 kilometres of narrow gauge, where the whole railway used to be narrow gauge and broad gauge. The narrow gauge now is only 16 kilometres. So it just goes to show times are changing. And our New South Wales government's got to wake up to itself. If we want people to come back and get rid of the XPT, put back a decent train, like they have in Melbourne. You get into Melbourne, you don't catch anything like the XPT down there in Melbourne. You catch a nice, comfortable train with a nice, decent thing. You're going to have a decent meal. Who wants to pay $15 for a little bit of tinfoil tray with 2 little bits of beef and a little bit of gravy, half a potato, and a couple of little bits of carrot and peas, and a little teaspoonful of potato? It's not worth it. So all the railways is doing is ripping themselves off. All this was started by Nick Greiner and the Liberals when they sacked the Transport Minister.
Feel quite despairing about it. They've been told that the cost is way too high and it's unaffordable, and that the condition of the line is really bad. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the costings and question them, and we're also going to have a look at the condition of the line and talk about that as well.
My name is Neil Battersby, and I'm a former locomotive engineman and test driver for Connex Trains in Melbourne. Construction of the Mooloolaba line began in Lismore in April 1891, and by May 1894, the first train ran from Lismore to Mullumbimby. The line through to Mooloolaba was completed on the 24th of December of the same year. The construction of the line from Lismore to Mooloolaba is a distance of just under 99 kilometres. This involved the construction of 116 bridges and 8 tunnels, and took 3 years and 8 months to complete, using the technology of the day, which was very hard labour, using bullock teams. The line did go further north for another 3.5 kilometres to the Condong Sugar Mill, which finally saw rail services on it in 1975. The line from Lismore to Old Casino was opened in October 1903, and the line to the current casino station was opened in September 1930, finally linking this region to Sydney by rail. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, I had the privilege and permission to do an 8mm film on this line. Some of that film was silent, some was sound. but it captured the rail traffic on this line. Two very well-known and loved trains, the Gold Coast Monorail and the North Coast Overnight Express. The information that I gathered for this film was through my father, who was the last official station master of Bangalore, and through a superintendent in head office in Sydney, together with Mr. Tom McInerney, who was the superintendent for the line. In the first year of operation, this new service had 25,000 bookings from Wollongbar alone. In 7 years down the track, it was taking a staggering 51,000 bookings, an increase of 26,000. Remember that these figures are from Wollongbar only, and does not include the bookings from Mullumbimby, Byron Bay, Bangalore, Lismore or Casino. In addition, it had the capacity of removing some 14,600 vehicles off our roads annually by the 2 car carrier wagons. The cost of operating this service per year was close to $11 million, yet its average yearly financial return was an astonishing $22.5 million. This service was so popular that in 1978 another service was introduced to cater for the demand of the public. The combination of these two services catered for over 1,600 passengers daily. Mr. Neil Morris was the North Coast marketing manager for the railways based at Grafton, and was the driving force behind the introduction of the Gold Coast Monorail and the Pacific Coast Overnight Express. He was also responsible for increasing freight services on the Moolumbar line. But on Christmas Eve, 1980, he was sacked for doing so. Councillor Tom O'Connor said that he had it on good authority that a senior officer who had embarrassed the Commission by attracting too much business would get the bullet. In the early months of 1990, both of these services were replaced with the XPT, with a seating capacity of only 434. The seating capacity of the former two services was 1,600. The XPT effectively ran as a night service through the region, severely reducing the capability of local usage as a type of commuter service like the former Motorrail and Overnight Express, resulting in a drop of patronage. When Queensland's South Coast Railway line reached Tweed.
Well, so basically what he's saying is once they took away the Gold Coast Motorrail Express and you couldn't have a decent sleeping berth and a decent meal, a decent first class and passenger seats and economy seats, and everything went on to this British Rail XPT, and it was only half the size, nobody wanted to get on it because the meals on it were crap. At least with the Gold Coast Motorrail, you had a dining car where you could actually sit down, you could have braised steak and vegetables and whatever else, and you pay a fair price of say $8 to $10. Nowadays, you pay $15 for two little round bits of roast beef about the size of your hand and bugger all with it. So why would you? And then in 1988, when Nick Greiner got elected, he then decided to rip out 29 of the 35 railway stations. So if you take away 29 of the 35 train stations, how are people supposed to get on the train if they can't get on them? So therefore, then if they can't get on the train, they can't make any money. And also, like Neil said, it's now a nighttime service, which means what about the local people? What about the bloke who wants to go from Wollongbar down to Byron Bay for the day to go to work and then come back overnight? Or the bloke who wants to go from Lismore to go to Wollongbar to go to work there, he can't because it's just a night service. He used to get there in the morning about 11 o'clock and then he'll leave at 4 o'clock in the afternoon after the staff cleaned the XPT out, and that was called the Grafton crew. So the crew would leave Sydney, get off at Grafton, the second crew would get on at Grafton, they'd ride it through to Moolumbar for 2 hours or 2.5 hours. They then spent 4 hours cleaning the train, changing the bed sheets and whatever else. But there's less and less people were on it. There's less and less people needed to keep the train clean. So half the time the staff was sitting around there doing nothing. And then they go back down to Grafton, get off the train and go home. And then the third crew would get on, go from Grafton back into Sydney. So therefore then they're paying for 3 crews of people and a train not making much money because it didn't provide any sort of service. Because by the time we went back to Grafton, well, this time it was then 8 o'clock at night. So what was the point of it? Or even 6 o'clock at night? Go look up the timetable. It's still there. You can still Google it and find out. So, but now Queensland Rail wants to expand its railway down to Coolangatta Airport, and they'd love to use the federal highway ground to run from Coolangatta Airport straight down into Byron Bay, bypass Mooloolaba, and come in at Hulls Road, and then come down into Byron Bay, down there through the Byron Bay Shire Council. But they're 3'6". They're not 4'8.5". They're narrow gauge, not standard gauge. And then Tweed City then misses out because they're not pushing either to say, hey, listen, okay, we want our rail trail Mooloolaba down to Crabs Creek and down to the joint onto the other one. How about extending it up there through to Coolangatta? Why isn't Tweed City Council trying to get the line reopened themselves? Now imagine the amount of money Tweed City Council's going to save and make by a railway line coming out of Coolangatta Airport, stopping at, say, Benora Point, stopping at Chindra Kingscliff, and then stopping on the way down there to Mooloolaba, bring tourism back to the area, and then carried on right round down to Mooball and right down to their boundary, and then let Byron Bay City Council then join it back up down there to Byron Bay, and then get all the people from Queensland that do drive all the way down there, all the way right back down to Byron Bay from Queensland. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll now show you. Now this is the Byron Bay roundabout at the Byron Bay level crossing. Now unfortunately the camera went vertically, didn't go horizontal. That's the Byron Bay train station right there, right now in front of the camera. It's to the north side of the level crossing. Now, if you really want to see how bad it is, Gladysberry Gicklean Jams, Jams, no trains from Mooloolaba to Byron Bay Casino, Sydney, billions of dollars spent new railways in Sydney. And this is what the poor people in Byron Bay have to put up with, that they've got no trains and everybody comes down from Queensland by car. Now look at the traffic jam. So I've muted the volume down because I'm raving on talking and going on whatever, which is typical me. But anyway, that's me. You just watch and see how many cars that go past me. Now, I'll speed it up here a bit so where I get somewhere where the camera's sitting up a little bit better. There we go. Check this out. Those cars there are going out of town. See the cars on the right? They're coming into town. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that great? Look at it. No, they're not parked. That's the main road coming into Byron Bay. Now, you want to know how many people have viewed that video? 331 views. 331. That's an average of 1 a day. And it's got a crappy heading like that. Gladysberry Gicklean jams no train Mooloolaba to Byron Bay Casino, Sydney, billions on new railways. And everybody says, oh, let's go to Byron Bay on holidays. Well, that's what you're looking forward to. Traffic jams. You want to leave Sydney, get out of the traffic, don't bother going to Byron Bay until they get a train back, because that's what you're going to be putting up with. Now, look, you watch the screen, and I'll zoom it forward. See how bad it is? How would you like to be sitting out there? You go to Byron Bay for a holiday from Sydney or Brisbane. Would you like to be sitting in that? I'm quite sure I wouldn't. And I filmed that for about 35 minutes. Now, this is Mullumbimby. Anybody know Mullumbimby, New South Wales? Gladys, New South Wales Premier, can we have our trains back after billions spent on Sydney? December 17th, 2020, 51 views. Because this wasn't showing any traffic. Anybody know how far away Mullumbimby is away from Sydney? Anybody got any idea at all? Yeah, I'm about to tell you. Have a listen. Because this is what Mr. Hominoid does. Change it in the State Rail Authority Corporation. And then it's a corporation, you can sell it all off. So this is now the end product. A disused, unused, graffiti railway station, Mullumbimby. Now, 898.220 kilometres from Sydney. There you go. That's the mileage from Central Number 1. 898.220. Right. There you go. And that yellow building there is the old Railway Peddler's Hut. Anyway, so if you want to train back up there to Byron Bay Mooloolaba, and the railway lines reopened out, say, like Binnaway and out there through Cootamundra, out to Cobar, or down there to Tumbarumba, down to Batlow, and whatever else, and you're into politics, and you want to start up a railway party, what I call GUNR party, Governments United Network, which is Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong, R for regional, GUNR regional party, right? It's a railway party. Basically, transport, buses, trains, and getting people back on the trains and stop all these cars on these motorways, because once the pandemic lifts, so many towns in New South Wales have died due to the pandemic, they need your dollars. And these motorways just kill towns. Now, you go to the town of Bulahdelah, it doesn't even have a railway line. It died because they put the motorway in. I went there and used to see car after car after truck after car, and coaches pulling up there, people buying meals, and now it's a ghost town. So don't think it doesn't happen. And remember, all you Sydneyites and Melbourneites and Brisbaneites and people all around the world, what happens if you don't support your local country towns? Isn't that where your eggs and your beef and your bacon and your wheat and everything else comes from? How many dairy farmers in Melbourne went broke due to the price of milk? How many dairy farmers went broke in New South Wales and Queensland with the price of milk? And then they put a 20-cent levy on every litre of milk. So if we bought 3 litres, instead of paying $3, you now pay $3.60 because the big supermarkets put them out of business. Well, don't you think it also hurts them too? What about when the drought was on? They couldn't get water out there to give the animals a drink because there's no railway lines working, which means they still had all their carriages that used to take 100 tonne of water, 100,000 litres of water. They could have watered all those animals. They wouldn't have died of dehydration. But no, they closed down the railway lines, got rid of the water carrying carriages, and all those animals died because they could have gave them water from somewhere else. You didn't stop to think about that. All those cows and sheep that died all out there in the bush back in the 2019 bushfires and heat and drought, and the dust was blowing. Why do you think the price of lamb now is so expensive? Why do you think the price of beef is so expensive? It takes time to filter through the system. Anyway, that's it there for me, Mr. Hominoid. So enjoy your steak. You're paying top dollar, and your beef and your bacon and your eggs. You're paying higher prices now because of the droughts and the bushfires. No railway. They could have took them out water, which would have kept the amount of stock more alive, which means more stock, which means you would have a lower price. But now you're paying the price because our former governments, way back in 1980, 1988, 1990, 1995, 2000, didn't think ahead, right? I lived through it. I started work on the railways in 1977. Okay, from Mr. Hominoid Down Under, like, share and subscribe. And don't forget, go and watch this video. I'll put it back on. You go and have a look at it. Bring the trains back. In your face screen. Go and watch that one. Really watch it if you want to learn about what's going on. And then things like this wouldn't happen. Theo Hayes, a missing backpacker. If you would have had a railway line, Theo could have caught the train. Maybe there wouldn't be so many people driving around in cars. Maybe all these idiots. Yeah, that's my video, Mr. Hominoid. And don't forget, there's also Theo Part 1 and 2. Gotta go check them out. See you later. And just for the record, today, the private investigator picked up that set of keys. So if you're into the Theo Hayes story, private investigators picked up the set of keys I found in Byron Bay down here in Sydney. So, but I won't tell you anything about it. Leave it all with you. So Mr. Hominoid Down Under, trains and backpackers all go together. That's why backpackers now buy vans. And therefore then they get over trusting because there's no rail service to protect them. You see what I'm trying to say? They've either got to buy a van or they walk out in the highway before the pandemic and they used to hitchhike. See the danger? What? Taking away the railways? You take away the public transport system, you leave people open to danger. Like look at Baldwin Bankrupt. He travelled across Russia and he stood out in the middle of nowhere. There was no water, no nothing. On a border, a police car pulled up and said, you know, you're right, where's your passport? Blah, blah, blah. And then they drove him off and left him there. And an hour and a half later, a guy comes along in a car and picks him up and gives him the lift. Out in the middle of bloody nowhere. So there you go. And that was Baldwin Bankrupt down on his channel. Anyway, so that happens all around the world, just not here in Australia. So from Mr. Hominoid at Gmail, mrhominoid@gmail.com. See you later. And please go and watch the videos. There's Theo. And don't forget this one. Bring the trains back. See you later, Mr. Hominoid. Go and watch it. You live in the Wollongbar, Byron Bay area? Casino Lismore, Wollongbar, Tweed-Heads, Coolangatta, Gold Coast? Go and watch it. You watch how much corruption's in the New South Wales government, especially under our best mate, Nick Greiner. See ya. Because he, when he left being Premier, he come in charge of the road construction companies, didn't he, on the board of directors? Ooh, isn't that a conflict of interest? See ya.